I saw this video 2 weeks ago from Set the Edge titled Fantasy Football Sucks. And it got me thinking, okay, yeah, this video is about injuries. This video is about players just randomly popping off. How crazy have drafts really been? I mean, it was 2 weeks ago then, and now we know that injuries have just decimated teams over the past few weeks. So I pulled up one of the $500 drafts that we did on the live stream this offseason on Underdog, and I want to go round by round, recapping essentially what these picks look like at this point of the year, and also talk about at the end some strategy that we can employ to go through and possibly fix our teams and get an edge with the randomness of fantasy football going forward. Now, round one, I mean, you would think, yeah, you take your guy round one, you're set rest of season. Hell, in this draft, I pulled the second pick overall, and I ended up taking Justin Jefferson at pick 2. Well, we just got news that Jefferson is on the IR, that Jefferson is at minimum missing 4 weeks. Based off the Vikings not really planning on competing, this may end up being more. We know Jamar Chase had 3. He was great this past week, but struggled early on because of the Burrow injury. Cooper Kupp had 5. Cooper Kupp ended up landing on the IR for the beginning of this season himself. Austin Eckler's played 1 game this season. Nick Chubb, season-long injury. Bijan's been fine. Kelsey's been fine. Outside of the 1 game that he did miss. Stephon Diggs has been fine. A.J. Brown has been fine. You've maybe had 1 decent week out of Saquon Barkley so far this season. So if you're just looking at round 1 this year, the players that are going to deal with significant injuries include Jefferson, Kupp, Eckler, Nick Chubb, and Saquon Barkley. That's 5 out of 6 of the first round selections. Almost 50% of first round picks will deal with a significant injury this season, and we're only in week 5. This may get even worse going forward. Now, going over to round 2, this is an interesting range in that you see that there was a dramatic fall off between those elite level players in those round 2 options. You had Jalen Hurts, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, Calvin Ridley, Mahomes, Waddle, and Devonta Smith. Now, what's interesting here is you see a lot of players that were selected in round 2 that maybe haven't been dealing with injuries, but they are just significantly worse than you were expecting. Hell, look at my own second round pick here where we go through and we take Jalen Waddle at the 2-3 turn. We take him as a high-end wide receiver 2, maybe mid wide receiver 2. Nonetheless, you can see, okay, well, yeah, even your round 2 selections, when these guys are staying healthy, they are far from guarantees to go out there and make a difference. Going down to round 3, you're seeing Jonathan Taylor on the IR through the first 4 weeks. You now have the T. Higgins injury that we are dealing with. You have Ramondre Stevenson in a horrendous offense. You have Jahmyr Gibbs going out there and giving you absolutely nothing this season. Hopefully he still has the upside later on. But nonetheless, round 3, kind of a similar story to round 2. And one of the big takeaways that I want to have through the first 3 rounds is not necessarily injury randomness. I know it seems crazy just because all the round 1 guys got injured. But if we ignore the injuries, I do want to point out what we've talked about in fantasy football for quite some time. And this can actually lead to some trade strategy in your leagues right now. You are seeing that dramatic fall off from those elite level players down to rounds 2 and 3. The hit rate on those guys in round 1, as long as they stay healthy, they are essentially locked and loaded studs for your fantasy football team. Now, of course, if they are dealing with injuries, then at that point, you're just kind of out of luck. But then you go down to rounds 2 and 3, those guys that you're very excited about, and it's just a completely different caliber of player. So when you hear me on a live stream and I'm recommending someone to go out there and trade 2 low-end wide receiver 1s just to get up to Tyreek Hill in a league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, the reason being is you have that dramatic fall off in value from those guys at the very top. Going over to the middle rounds, Mike Williams out for the season. You're looking at Christian Watson missing a considerable amount of time. Drake London giving you absolutely nothing. Najee Harris giving you absolutely nothing. DeAndre Hopkins giving you pretty much nothing. Terry McLaurin giving you pretty much nothing as well. And one thing that I want to also be taking away here from the middle rounds is if you're going to be looking at some of these wide receivers, yes, you have a few mega hits. You have Keenan Allen out there just dominating due to the Mike Williams injury. You have DJ Moore crushing right now. DJ Moore is the wide receiver 4 from a points per game perspective so far this season. I will say as a quick side note, still think that DJ Moore is a sell-high guy if you can go get get someone like CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown instead. But I do really like the DJ Moore pick'em on Underdog this weekend. If you look at it, they have DJ Moore at 56.5 receiving yards. I'm going more than 56.5 receiving yards on DJ Moore on Underdog. And of course, if you want to check out that pick'em or any other pick'em this weekend on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the description, find it in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match. You're going to get our rest of season fantasy football rankings in tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, because it was our birthday this week, Underdog's hooking everybody up with a Justin Herbert special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard. And on top of that, if you're new to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're also going to get a Joe Burrow special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard. Super happy that I'm able to get y'all all of that. Very rarely are you going to find something like that. So please make sure you take advantage while you can. But nonetheless, moving on, what I also want to look at is the fact that these wide receivers, these running backs are far from guarantees, even if they stay healthy here in the middle rounds. So going forward, what I kind of want to do is I want to be taking those elite level quarterbacks. I mean, you saw us do this in this draft where we took Josh Allen there in round 3, but you kind of have an idea of who those elite level quarterbacks will be. You have Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, Lamar, Allen, Mahomes, Jalen Hurts as the first 5 guys off the board in this draft at the quarterback position. And all these guys are pretty big hits. None of these guys are you super disappointed about. And transitioning over to round 5, Darren Waller, I mean, it was so funny that I was going over TJ Hawkinson in the first place. We sadly passed on Hawkinson. We took Kenneth Walker round 5. We needed a running back. It is what it is. But nonetheless, you have Pickens, Aaron Jones, Madison, Deontay, Dameon Pierce, Christian Kirk, Brandon Ayuk, and Tyler Lockett all going here in round 5. So how many players from round 5 actually are making a difference with your team versus like a Kyron Williams pickup off the waiver wire? I mean, here in round 5, you have Hawkinson making a difference. Kenneth Walker making a difference. Maybe Aaron Jones does down the road. He hasn't so far. Brandon Ayuk's been good. Maybe Burrow does down the road. You pretty much have 3 hits from this round in fantasy. You go down to round 6. You have George Kittle hitting. You have maybe you want to say Jordan Addison, Mike Evans are going to be decent. But at the very most, you're looking at 3 to 4 guys here in round 6 that are actually truly making a difference for your roster. Instead, you have guys like Kyle Pitts flaming out. You have J.K. Dobbins done for the year. You have Jahan Dotson not getting anything at all. I mean, you have Anthony Richardson now missing a considerable amount of time. Going down to round 7, you have a few hits like James Cook, Gabe Davis, Zay Flowers, David Montgomery, Michael Pittman. I mean, Alvin Kamara, maybe Dallas Goedert there at pick 84. But what I really want to focus in on once we're getting to these rounds like 5, 6, 7, if you were to switch round 7 and round 5 in this draft, would you even notice? Is there a real difference between a round 5 selection and a round 7 selection in fantasy football? Not really, right? I mean, there looks to be more difference-making players in round 7 than at rounds 5 and 6, maybe even combined this year in fantasy. So this goes with a continued trend that you have those elite level players at the very top in round 1. Then beyond that, rounds 2 through 4 are about the same. Rounds 5 through 7 are about the same. And these tiers that we are making in this overall value proposition is significantly flatter when we get to the middle rounds. Going down a little bit further, I mean, rounds 8 through 9, I mean, here you have some other running backs that are just absolutely nothing. You have like Dalvin Cook giving you nothing. Antonio Gibson giving you nothing. I mean, Khalil Herbert getting injured. A.J. Dillon really not giving you anything at all either. I mean, wide receivers, you have Sky Moore, you have Rashad Bateman, you have Quentin Johnson, Elijah Moore, Michael Thomas, Brandon Cooks, Treylon Burks, and Kadarius Toney. Now, I really was never taking wide receivers in this range of underdog drafts just because it was the clear dead zone. I think a lot of people understood that as well. And you'll notice as we go through the next 4 rounds, you can maybe make an argument that 1 wide receiver hits in rounds 8 through 12. I mean, if we're going down to 12, you can make an argument for 2 wide receivers, Nico Collins and Adam Thielen. Every single other wide receiver pick, throw in Jacoby Myers. You have 3 guys. You have 3 wide receivers in a span of 4 rounds that are actually doing something for your team. It's not that much better at running back. It's not that much better at tight ends. Now, I knew the wide receivers were going to be bad in this range, but I was the guy out there drafting Freiermuth. I was the guy out there drafting David Njoku. So, I mean, I can't sit here and go, ha, 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 I told you so not to draft wide receivers here. Hell, I mean, I'd way rather not have drafted tight ends either. In reality, what I would have rather done is I would have taken this 9th round pick. I would have taken this 10th round pick, and I would have rather sent it out there to get an upgrade from maybe round 4 to round 2, you know. Or obviously, if we could have moved from like an early second to a late first, it's a no-brainer looking at the way that this draft board fell out. So there are a couple overarching ideas and lessons learned for what we can keep in mind going forward and how we can be better drafters in the future and make better moves for our fantasy football teams right now. Understand that the cream of the crop at the very top of your draft is a completely different tier, is a completely different player than those guys that you're going to see in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You would rather go through and have 2 first-round picks and trade away your rounds 5, 6, 7 in your regular fantasy football draft just to get another first. Because as we go through these middle rounds as well, you'll begin to notice, yeah, you have some of these guys hitting. I mean, you have maybe 3 to 4 players in the middle rounds hitting in each round and actually making a difference to your team. But the vast majority of these players aren't true difference makers. And where that takes us is the value of a roster spot and the value of the waiver wire. It all comes back down to this lesson. Every chance you get to take 2 mid-tier players and to trade them for a top-tier player, you need to take. Those middle-tier players aren't nearly as far away from the bottom-end players on your waiver wire as they are to the top-end guys. So if you're going out there, and I see this move all the time, you're, say, trading Derrick Henry and let's go Calvin Ridley, and you're getting back Austin Eckler. Someone can sit there, they can make an argument, oh, okay, well, Derrick Henry could be a low-end RB1 rest of season. Calvin Ridley can be a low-end wide receiver 1, and I really need an extra starter. I'm going to be dealing with injuries and buys over the next few weeks. Let me sell Austin Eckler, and let me just get 2 startable players in right now. And in reality, what you're going to have to do as well is you're going to have to then go through and drop someone at the bottom end of your team. You're going to have to drop someone, say like, I don't know, maybe Jacoby Myers before he breaks out, Adam Thielen before he breaks out, or maybe even just someone like Romeo Doubs, right? Maybe you have to drop Romeo Doubs this week after he does nothing last week. And then you end up seeing that wide receiver that you dropped had a points per game mark significantly closer to Calvin Ridley than what you had with Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry. That stud player at the very top end was just worth significantly more. And when you have that open roster spot, we clearly don't know who's going to be good in the middle rounds. We have no idea with those mid-tier players. If you have the open roster spot, you're able to continuously take shots on guys off waivers. Because what is so funny is in underdog drafts, you draft 18 rounds deep every time, right? You're going 18 rounds deep because underdog drafts, you're not going to be making waiver wire moves. They're best ball, a little bit different. But just to go and show you how, I don't want to say random, but how hard it is to see these things, Puka was not being drafted in the majority of underdog drafts. Like over 90% of drafts, I believe Puka was not drafted in. And you went 18 rounds deep. Kyron Williams was not drafted in 90% of underdog drafts. Zach Moss is a perfect example because Puka, Kyron Williams, maybe you can say, well, Mason, those guys are outliers. I picked those guys up. I played them in the short term and I get rest of season production as well. Zach Moss may be a good example of just the value of that roster spot and maybe not being able to hit on a waiver wire gem that's going to be able to be a cornerstone piece for your team through the rest of the season. But if you can pick up a player like Zach Moss, start him for 2 to 3 weeks, get that production, and then when Jonathan Taylor comes back, then we transition to another player off the waiver wire and try to put Band-Aids on and go 2 to 3 weeks at the time. The waiver wire can really win you your fantasy league. Yes, injuries suck. Yes, injuries are very random. There's nothing that we can really change from a strategy perspective around those. And instead, any chance we get to trade those middle round players for an elite level option is something we should do. But I think that's all I have for you. If you enjoyed this video, go down there, drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog Fantasy this weekend, like I said, my favorite pick'em's going to be DJ Moore for more than 56.5 receiving yards. You can find that link in the description and in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 100% deposit match plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings. And because it was our birthday this week, Underdog's hooking everybody up with a Justin Herbert special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard, only if you use promo code FLOCK. And if you use code FLOCK as well, you're going to be getting a Joe Burrow special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard on Sunday as well. So please make sure you're taking advantage of it. Super happy we're able to get you all that. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope that we get to see you out in a live stream tomorrow night.